Now, how in the flying flip did we let him come into America and give a speech at the UN? Nobody walked out on him. Nobody turned their back on him. Nobody's even said anything about it.
Some of his soldiers are here on U.S. soil for a future attack.
Can you explain like what that is, what that means for America, and how in the world did he get them in here?
Their intent is there's a multiple terrorist groups supporting al-Qaeda's plot, and they're all running different pieces and different cells for kind of a massive 9/11 style upcoming plot here.
That's crazy. What does that look like for America? Because you had mentioned before that they are coordinating terrorist sleeper cells in America, and they want to do an October 7th style attack. What does that look like? I mean, I don't think they could take people hostage like they did in October the 7th. Is it just a mass casualty situation, or do they think they're going to take land?
If it doesn't get forwarded, or pieces of this doesn't get forwarded, this will obviously be probably the biggest attack ever on the U.S. since Pearl Harbor.
Sarah Adams, welcome to the Officer Tatum Show. I'm excited to talk to you. And I feel like that people of your caliber understanding terrorism, counterterrorism, and things that go on in this country, especially with this guy that we're about to talk about, I think is invaluable. I don't think enough people are talking about the terrorism, the cells of terrorists that are already in our country. And this gentleman, Julani, or whatever his name is, Abu, I want to talk about him. He was the one featured at the UN where he got on stage and he had given a speech on behalf of a country, and nobody walked out on him. And there's rumors and reports that you can clear up for me and the audience that this guy was a part of a terrorist cell. He was a part of committing terrorism linked to Hamas to some degree. Can you talk to us about that? And I also want to jump to, after we deal with Abu, I want to talk about the threat of terrorism that already exists in this country underneath, the reality of what we know.
Yeah, so as a quick down and dirty, okay, Julani joined al-Qaeda in Iraq right after we invaded, so around 2003. He ended up being like a senior commander, and he was leading efforts in Mosul, and he was doing a lot of those suicide attacks and those IEDs against the U.S. patrols, right? So he killed a lot of Americans during that time. About 5 years in, we detain him, and he goes to Camp Bucca. He gets released. He then joins back with al-Qaeda in Iraq, and now it's led by Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Remember, Trump killed him and said he died like a dog, so most people know him. So he was then attacking U.S. soldiers, and in 2011, the Syrian civil war kicked off, and Baghdadi sent him to Syria to set up an al-Qaeda group there. It was called al-Nusra Front. He was attacking Assad forces, American civilians there, and American soldiers. That's when we put him on the most wanted list. Now, fast forward to 2017, he created another group. It's called HTS. That's the group that did this big overthrow of the Syrian government in November. And that's the group that's linked up with al-Qaeda since December 2021. And they're providing terrorists that came to the U.S. homeland as sleeper cells. So some of his soldiers are here on U.S. soil for a future attack.
Now, how in the flying flip did we let him come into America and give a speech at the UN? Nobody walked out on him. Nobody turned their back on him. Nobody's even said anything about it. I thought that this was fake news. I was like, people, he probably looked like another guy that they're propping up and people just want to share stuff. But this is the guy that's responsible for American deaths, responsible for terrorism. And you said that he has now, with the organization he created, have sleeper cells here in America. Can you explain like what that is, what that means for America, and how in the world did he get them in here?
Yeah, really, really simply, starting the end of 2021, al-Qaeda started plotting an attack here. So starting in 2022, they started sending terrorists here. The majority of them, as you can imagine, came over the southern border with fake identity documents. So like, let's say he sent a Syrian terrorist here. He might have a Turkish passport. He came over the border, so he's now here with a Turkish identity. Even if he was on a watch list, it doesn't matter because he's under a fake identity. Another way they did it is they used some of these fake identities and they went into other pipelines. One pipeline was kind of how we evacuated special immigrant visas from both Iraq and Afghanistan. So some of the terrorists went in those pipelines. Another pipeline is they came in different education programs like through universities, etc. So some unfortunately came here legally as well. And so their intent is there's a multiple terrorist group supporting Al Qaeda's plot, and they're all running different pieces and different cells for kind of a massive 9/11 style upcoming plot here.
And people, I can hear their voices in my mind saying, how do you know all these things are true? Because this seems like something that our government should be on top of, they should be privy to, and it should be the number one threat presented, or at least the way that they should be investigating and thwarting. This should be like the number one threat that we should be concerned of. So how do you have this information and know all of these things that don't seem to be public?
Yeah, well, our government does know a lot of these terrorists came in. The unfortunate thing is they don't know the numbers. So when Director Joe Kent went through the confirmation process in Congress, he gave us some of the numbers. It's not all of them, but he said, "Hey, we know when we evacuated persons from Afghanistan, 1,400 of them were linked to a terrorist group." He also said, "We know 600 people came in over the southern border through an ISIS pipeline." So he highlighted 2,000 of these terrorists, which is a small number, but it's still, he did say that publicly, right? So this is well known. Now, when we talk about some of these Syrian connections, they've already been involved in a plot. So the January 1st New Orleans attack links back to some of these HTS networks.
Hmm.
The government kind of made you feel, hey, this was a lone wolf. That's actually not the case. His cell, Shamsuddin Jabbar, his name was, he was a former veteran who unfortunately ended up joining ISIS. His cell was led by the ISIS military commission, and the US government did kill the head of that commission. They bombed him just this March, and he's gone now. The deputy head of that cell, his name's Khalid al-Shami, he is in Julani's Ministry of Defense. So think about it. He's basically running a giant unit in their military, be kind of like the head of our PACOM sent a terror cell to another country, right? So it's almost like an act of war if you really looked at it, because it is directly to his, Defense Department.
Why they let him do it? Like, I mean, in your opinion, I mean, obviously you're not in their brains, but why did they let Julani speak in America? Like, does that show that we're weak and we're allowing this to happen? Therefore, our vulnerabilities can be exploited, or is there a tactic to it? Or could we be the CIA track him and bug him, and they're trying to find a way to get him in so we can, you know, thwart his opportunity to do this? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's two pieces. There's a political piece, and then like you're kind of bringing up an operational piece. The political piece is very, very simple. There's a strong effort for kind of a Middle East peace plan, maybe leading into something like a Nobel Peace Prize. And there's a belief they need to bring Julani, who's now the president of Syria, since he took over the country with a bunch of terrorists last year. They need him for this peace plan. So that's the political piece. Now, unfortunately, on the operational side, our Department of Defense is allied with Julani, and they're taking out targets for him. Unfortunately, they're selling it to the American people as, hey, we're doing these effective operations against ISIS, and they're not. Just this year, two times they said they killed the head of ISIS. He's still alive. So they think they're taking out targets, but they're not. And they fell for the same ruse, unfortunately, in Afghanistan, where we're partnered with the Taliban. So it's kind of, we're just watching the exact same thing that happened in Afghanistan happen again.
Do you think it's intentional, or do you think it's incompetence? Like, is the President Trump and our forces, or our CIA, and the people that can do all the dirty work and should have technology to understand all of these things? How can we continue to get bamboozled?
I think a little bit hubris. Nobody wants to admit they are falling for terrorist propaganda. I think there's a lot of people in our government, even within our Congress, that wanted to see some sort of peace in Syria. So almost like forcing it, even though he's already committed just this year genocide against Christians, genocide against Alawites. This is a guy who actually is one of the lead people who imprisoned and made all those Yazidi women be ISIS brides, and they raped them, kidnapped them. We saw the public displays where they sold them, right? So yeah, it's like a want for something. Like everybody wants like like these bad guys to become good like us, and they can't understand a terrorist has one goal, and they're never going to be us. And I do think it's a little head in the sand.
Well, I'm gonna switch gears real quick because you seem to be very knowledgeable about America's connections in all of these places. You know, I have been a staunch supporter of Israel. Obviously, I'm a big Zionist, and I'm not as privy to some of the back end things that have gone on. What's your thoughts on some of that? Because a lot of people complain that we should not be allied with Israel and that they're a negative force to America and all of those things. I mean, somebody who's seemed to be an expert like you that know a lot about the involvement with Syria and Afghanistan, and I mean, is there any truth to any of those claims that somehow Israel is not really an ally of America?
Yeah, I really don't think that's the case. I'm obviously anti terrorist. A lot of that comes in as a part of terrorist propaganda, unfortunately. What is a fact is the planning for October 7th started in March 2022. And actually, October 7th wasn't just a Hamas attack, it was planned by Iran, as most people know. Al Qaeda was involved, and then the senior leadership of the Taliban. Now, that attack was basically a dress rehearsal for the big one coming to the US homeland. So,
Mm.
those terrorists trained in camps with those sleeper cells I told you that came here. So this is like one small piece of the pie. So the way I look at it is, hey, everybody Israel kills in this piece of the pie helps us. They've already killed. I told you how we killed one individual involved in the plot. They killed one of the Iranian brigadier generals involved in the plot here, right? So everyone they kill, as you can imagine, makes us safer because they take out one more person in this pipeline. They took out the whole senior leadership of the Hezbollah Radwan forces. Again, that's very, very crucial. They were actually targeting US interests as well, and they were involved all the way back to our Marine Beirut bombings. So the thing is, Israel has been incredibly effective against terrorists in the last 2 years. As you can imagine, to be effective against terrorists, you have to go a little scorched earth. We saw this in Libya. Terrorists took over the city of Benghazi after we left. Okay, so there was a general, General Haftar. He had to go in and do the same thing, and in 2.5 years, he eliminated both Al Qaeda and ISIS from basically all of East Libya. Right? This is how you unfortunately have to do these operations. We don't always have the spine to do it, and that's why we gave the Taliban back Afghanistan. Unfortunately, the U.S. doesn't play hardball in this way, but I do think it is effective against this enemy.
I'm glad you said that. I've been getting killed about Israel, and I don't know nothing. You know, I don't know much about the underpinning ideas that some of these people are bringing up. And then again, I had no idea where you stood on that. So, but I do respect what you have to say, and I wanted to know is like, what is this? Because I felt, like I said, not as knowledgeable as you, but I felt like that there's a reason why we have a strategic partnership with Israel. Everything I hear Benjamin Netanyahu say seems to be connected to some of the things that you're saying. Like we have this partnership because they are fighting our enemy in the Middle East, and we give them billions of dollars in aid for military funding, which would make sense that we're using them kind of like almost like proxy to do these wars, and we're funding that. I want to get
Yeah.
back
Can
to.
I
Oh,
bring
go
up
ahead. Go
one
ahead.
thing about the funding, though? So, the
Okay.
interesting thing is when we fund our allies, for example, in these cases, a lot of that is the money stays here in the United States. We buy the weapons and we fund them that way. So, that's also how we kind of support our own military, right, through these sales to our allies. Because you can imagine we can't just sell weapons to anybody. We have moral compasses. Some people use these weapons in horrible ways against their own people and for genocides and stuff. So we are very particular about our allies and who we give weapons to, but that money really filters mostly into us.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And yeah, a lot of people don't know that. Like they say, we give Israel $3.8 billion a year, but it's like no, we don't just give them the money and let them go buy military equipment anywhere in the world.
Right.
They have to come to us to use all of that money with us, or at least in this year. I think the last year they have to use 75%. I think it's going to end up being 100% of that military funding. They have to come through us, and I think it's like a bank account. It's not even like a money given. It's kind of like they have a credit line through things that they end up using that's our military economic money back to the America and our national security. But I wanted to get to specifically how is this gentleman Julani connected to Hamas? Is there a direct connection, or is it a connection through Iran and Syria or something, or is it like a direct connection to the terrorists in Hamas?
Yeah, the best way to put it is the terrorists have joined this council. It's called the United Resistance Council. The kind of like funny name people call it is the Islamic Army. So it was basically set up by Al Qaeda, but all these terrorist groups joined and they share resources, money, funding. So, like Al Qaeda is a member of it, Julani's HTS is a member of it, and Hamas is a member of it. So, here's a good way to explain how this works, okay? So obviously, a bunch of Hamas terrorists got killed. So you have to reconstitute Hamas. How do you do that? You got to train new members. Where do you train new members? You're not training them in Gaza. You got to train them in Syria or Afghanistan. So if you train them in Syria, you have to train them in camps owned by Julani and HTS. If you train him in Afghanistan, he has camps there. You could use his camps there or Al Qaeda's camps. So you allow HTS into your camps, you train them, you maybe give them weapons, some funding to help them reconstitute because you're all a part of this council, that you're supporting each other's initiatives because we all have a shared goal against the United States, Israel, the West, etc. Because they want and are believing now that they're starting to begin to form a Islamic caliphate, and they at least in their heads believe that's starting.
So you're saying Hamas isn't going anywhere? Like
No.
even if Netanyahu and the IDF eliminate Hamas in Gaza, which I don't know how they would know who's Hamas and who's not, because it's not like they wear uniforms or something. But if they believe that they've eliminated them, they haven't really eliminated them, right? Because
Right.
they can just continue in another path through another country that's allied.
Yeah, really good example is so prior to October 7th, Hamas did send a bunch of terrorists to Afghanistan to train, and they trained in 6 terrorist camps. Now, because as we said, a lot of Hamas members really have been killed, they are now training in 12 terrorist camps in Afghanistan. So if you kill one Hamas member, you train 2 new ones. So unless they're going to start striking them or they're reconstituting and that's not happening because the US has stopped its strikes in Afghanistan, then Hamas will just keep reestablishing and growing itself. And then these other groups are obviously supporting in this effort. Now, remember, this number really doesn't get discussed, but when those terrorists crossed into Israel, the number is somewhere in the 7,000 range. There weren't 7,000 members of Hamas crossing over. There's people who are like within the Taliban, these Syrian terrorist groups like HTS. We know Libyans who died in the October 7th, right? So also they were supplemented even the day of the attacks by other terrorist groups.
That's crazy. What does that look like for America? Because you had mentioned before that they are coordinating terrorist sleeper cells in America, and they want to do an October 7th style attack. What does that look like? I mean, I don't think they could take people hostage like they did in October 7th. Is it just a mass casualty situation, or do they think they're going to take land? They're going to take a small town, or what do you think that's all about?
So what we've seen, at least with the plotting, I'd say there's 3 pieces. One's a large aviation plot again, and that they're just going to do suicide bombers on planes and drop them down, and that's for mass casualty. The goal is to kill 4,000 people. Then they want something like you said about almost a hostage and hold ground. That seems to be some sort of assault or attack at Washington, D.C., because they want to cripple the federal government's response. And then the last piece, they are going to go into our communities, unfortunately, like it was for October 7th. ISIS is leading that piece, and they're how they trained is in 5 to 10 man kind of urban assault teams, and they're going to attack like churches, supermarkets, hospitals, and they're going to do multiple locations at a time. So that'll be very difficult for law enforcement. And they're also going to either target law enforcement or look like law enforcement to fool civilians, which they also did that during the October 7th attack. So if it doesn't get thwarted or pieces of this doesn't get thwarted, this will obviously be probably the biggest attack ever on the US since Pearl Harbor. So it's a very, very scary situation. Now, when you talk about these groups, so you know how we say Hamas did October 7th? Well, now I told you all these different groups in this council are supporting this attack. So you're not going to have a cell of 5 Hamas members. That 5-person cell, let's say, which is they're really focused on veteran communities. Let's say they do Tampa, with big veteran community. So the 5-person cell will have maybe a Hamas member, an HTS member, an ISIS member, an al-Qaeda member, and like a Taliban member. So that's what they want to do different here, because our government can't go after these cells when they're multiple groups. We're not even designed to confront terrorists that way.
That's crazy. I hope that it doesn't happen. I mean, people, some of these veteran communities are stacked to the gill with guns, so hopefully they can have a reasonable defense. And that's another reason why I think America need to get their head out of the rear end and understand that we can never give up our arms, because a situation like that, you come and invade, you go and invade Canada. I mean, they could take over a lot of real estate before the military can respond.
Yes.
In America, you got to worry about the hillbillies and you got to worry about the rednecks and some people that, former military and police officers that can really put together an assault team themselves and take care of business. So I just wonder what the government is going to do. Do you think that they're going to be successful in this? Or do you think the government is equipped, ready under this administration or possibly the next administration to actually thwart something like this?
I think we haven't thwarted enough pieces. Like 2 senior leaders are dead, which is a good thing. I don't think we've picked up, though, like the attackers that are here, especially if it really is hundreds upon hundreds of them. So unfortunately, in my opinion, we're at a point where the plot is so far along. I do think pieces of it are going to happen. I hope the government leans in and at least can affect some parts. Obviously, the aviation piece, right, is the easiest one for the government to stop. So I'd like to see them lean in more. But as you know, our focus is kind of the cartels now, the border. We reclassify what terrorism is, and we've dropped the ball on Islamic terrorism. So when we say, oh, we arrested 200 terrorists this month, well, those are now Latin American cartel and gang members. They're not a terrorist from Saudi and Kuwait and Egypt and Jordan like we're going to see in this plot. And so I'm a little concerned that there is hubris that, oh, al-Qaeda can't pull this off. Bin Laden's sons aren't his father. And I am worried that we're going to be a little like Israel and downplay and not take serious what's coming, because Israel never thought Hamas could do an attack like that. And that's why they were so unprepared when it happened.
Yeah, speaking of that, I don't know if you have any insight on this. I mean, Netanyahu is getting a lot of pushback, and even Charlie, rest his soul, had questions about their response. Now, I went to Israel, but we didn't go to the West Bank because it was, I mean, not the West Bank. We didn't go to Gaza, the Gaza Strip, because it's too dangerous. We were on a Christian tour with a church, so they were like, "Yeah, we're not going down there because they could be live in rockets over here at any point." And so, do you think? And it's just a hypothesis. I mean, I don't think any of us really know. What do you think happened there? Because people are saying that it was a 6 hours for them to respond. I don't know if that's like officially respond, or I don't know where people are getting that number from, but it's allegedly it took them way longer than normal to actually respond to the terrorist attack. Was it because they got caught off guard, or was it something a little more nefarious?
Yeah, well, the 6 hours is a rumor. That isn't actually true. There are a couple things that affected response. Number one, first off, in that border area, they kind of left technology to run it, right? So technology is going to alert us if there's an incursion. Well, now we have thousands of people coming over. We don't really have bodies on the border anymore because we're using technology. Another thing is those communities near the border had these kind of civilian community watch teams, and they used to actually be better trained and armed, but as they put the technology in, they took a lot of the weapons from them and said, you don't really need this anymore. So when the attack happened, they had maybe 5 weapons for a whole community. Okay. So that was a first line of defense, but it kind of had gone away over time. Then the terrorists actually struck first responders in both the first wave and the second wave. So in the first wave, they went straight at police stations and just went straight to the people who would respond to you and kill you. The other part's even smarter. So what they did is they had done pre-surveillance on how first responders are going to leave, like the routes they're going to take. They set up on the routes, and when the first responders left, they ambushed them on the routes and killed them. So it really hasn't been put out publicly, but a lot of first responders, military, etc., EMS died early on in the attack because they were initial targets.
I figured that because I saw that even in the death toll number, they were saying that there was IDF soldiers and others involved in a death number. And I think that's important for people to understand. I just think for some reason, Israel just, their PR is terrible. Like whoever is doing PR or trying to disseminate information on their behalf is just dropping the ball. I mean, you don't hear this publicly. You don't hear anything explained. You don't hear anything of the tactics that Hamas used. You don't hear any of the connections of Hamas and that this was a multi-front assault. Like I heard early on that they were planning on hitting them from multiple sides, but somehow the plan got thwarted and others backed out and Hamas did the killing, and then that's how they got overrun. But I don't know if it was true or not, but I heard that they were going to try to attack from Syria and they were going to try to attack from other places at the same time as this attack. Was that, do you have any information on that?
So the only thing that really didn't happen, so they staged in Syria. So the attack technically was from Syria. That's where the majority of the terrorists staged. Now, the one element that chose not to get involved that would have led to thousands of more deaths was Hezbollah's Radwan forces that I told you about. So they chose not to get involved. They would have been the northern assaults. So it would have been a lot worse by the terrorists. We would have now had 9,000 terrorists come over at once. But again, as you can imagine, just in the 6,000 range, there are not governments and communities who can handle that. I mean, could you imagine if even just 6,000 came over the southern border into those border communities? What would happen?
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, one shooter at a school or at some of these places are hard to handle. They can't be contained. It's only one. Imagine 3, 4. They have some type of training and tactical experience. That have a plan. I mean, it would be overwhelming. As a former police officer myself, we're not equipped. Local law enforcement is not equipped whatsoever to deal with some of this stuff. Even our SWAT teams are only 30, 40 people at a reasonable size agency. And, so even the top guys, only 30 or 40 of them, you had 1,000 people at a time mobilizing. It'll be incredibly difficult to overcome that. And so what are you optimistic about the future of America, or are we headed down a path of no return, meaning that we're going to end up getting taken over by Islamic ideology? We're going to let anti-Semitism and hatred divide us in our country, racism and talks of hatred towards the government. Are we going to just be so splintered that the enemy could infiltrate either by, electronics, whether shutting down the grid or cell phones, or they're going to, be able to get at us while we're looking this way on a terrorist attack that you explained before? What are you optimistic? Like, we got resolve enough to overcome this?
Yeah, I mean, what I focused on, and I've done this since January, is I'm going community to community, talking to sheriff's departments, the mayors, et cetera, governors in some states to be like, hey, if the federal government drops the ball on this, right, it's on the community level. We need to respond. Like you said, a SWAT team, first off, is going to take 40 minutes to respond. Obviously, you can't do that in this type of attack. So we've at least been trying to talk about resiliency. Let's get ahead of this. Let's get to the post 9/11 mindset. But the negative is the culture of our country, as you know, is not 9/12, right? We're not all going to come together. And that's another thing we've been really trying to inform people. Like when this happens, a lot of people are actually going to blame the government. And then we're going to become a lot more broken. There's going to be a lot more division, right? Because you're also not trusting your own party. So I am worried that we're going to have a rough patch if this plot goes through, unfortunately. And I do think our enemies will take advantage of us because we'll be weak in that moment.
So sad. It's so sad that this happened. I know you wrote a book. You co-authored Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy with Dave Benson. Is that what it is?
Yeah,
So, so,
exactly.
so you wrote a book, you co-authored a book, Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy, with Dave Benton. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Yeah, just long story short, back in 2015, me and Boone, from 13 Hours fame,
Yeah.
realized the US government wasn't actually going after and finding the terrorists that attacked us in Benghazi. So we did our own investigation on the ground in Libya and in Turkey, to find them and identify them ourselves. So when we got to a decent spot of our investigation, as you can imagine, we found all these terrorists and we're like, who do we give them to? And we didn't want to get in trouble by handing them to foreign governments. So we put them inside of a book and distributed it so then we could give it to anyone we wanted, right? So that's why we put out that book. But we've done multiple investigations since now. We did one into Abbey Gate, we did one into October 7th. We did one into a lot of these fake ISIS attacks going on, etc. And those we've just all put out as free PDFs for the public so they can kind of get a better understanding of how all these terrorists are coming together and how they're working on joint operations together.
How can people find this content? I mean, I'm sure your book is probably on Amazon and anywhere you can buy books, but how do people follow you and follow what you guys are doing? Because I think what you're saying is incredible. Like, we need to be more aware of this. I feel like we're looking over here at stuff that don't mean nothing, and then we're going to get blindsided on this other side with the things that are probably could be most damaging to our country.
Yeah, very simple. The book, like you said, is on Amazon, or you can get Kindle, or you can get the ebook on Audible. For any of the other documents, all you got to do is go to any of my social media. The easiest one is TPA Sarah at on Twitter, and if you go to the link in bio, it's just all free downloads of these investigations I'm talking about. Or if you go to Boone, he's just DB_Boone on Instagram, and he has the same LinkedIn bio, and you can pull him down. So you can always reach out to if you can't find what you need.
Perfect. I got one more question, as short as you can, because we're running low on time. This has been a conspiracy that I have never gotten an answer for, and I don't even know if we're investigating this or not. The Las Vegas shooter. What happened there? Like, I'm confused because I want to think it's a man that went crazy, but it seems to be a lot of weird stuff that went on. Like, there was indicia of Antifa. I didn't a terrorist group. Was it ISIS? Uh, they took responsibility for it. Like, what do you know about that? That's one of the biggest
Sure.
ones that I'm still confused about.
Yeah, so we have been wanting to investigate this one and we haven't found the right access. But here's what we've learned, okay? So ISIS says within the months prior to the attack, he joined ISIS. They gave him an Abu name, like you just said, Abu Mohammed's name. And he did the attack as ISIS. Now, they said this from day one. Now, even if you look at their propaganda over the last year, you know how they did this horrible attack in Russia? Well, after the Russia attack, they actually put out a piece of propaganda of their attacks that were the most deaths, right? And they had the Las Vegas shooting on it. So there's numerous pieces of propaganda also in the last year where they made a nod to the shooter. So to this day, ISIS senior leadership still says he joined ISIS as an ISIS attack. So in my opinion, I actually do believe it's an ISIS attack. Now, we have tried to work like when and how did he make the connection, right? There has to be some sort of email communication, something. So we did try to do some digging, and we just don't have a kind of access to ISIS, kind of in the Iraq, Syria that we need. But that's the piece I think our government really wasn't honest about, the fact that ISIS claimed it. They claimed it right away because, as you can imagine, allowing an ISIS attack where like 600 people get impacted on U.S. soil is a really, really bad thing. I do wish, though, we were more honest about it because I don't think they did really good research into the ISIS angle of it.
That's crazy to me. You said it right. I mean, I don't know. Our government is weird to me. They got a lot of technology, a lot of great people. They do a lot of great things, but man, they just dropped the ball and they're conniving and lying, and it's kind of weird to me. I guess I could ask you another question. I was gonna end it there, but now that we're in the conspiracy zone,
No, no.
and when it come to Charlie, like, I don't think that there's a conspiracy there. I don't think that the government is covering something up. I think it's kind of cut and dry, in my personal opinion. But I do know that things can happen throughout an investigation. Do you have any insight on that? Do you think that it's cut and dry, even with the questions? Because every investigation in the preliminary state, they haven't even gone to trial. We don't even know
Mhm.
what evidence the government does have and don't. So, but do you think that there is something other? Because people think that Israel did it. Some people think that Turning Point did it. Some people are saying that the lapel mic blew up on him, which I think is all ridiculous. But do you think it's anything there? Could this be a coordinated attack from a foreign government, or was it just a deranged guy that got, propagated into killing Charlie Kirk out of anger?
Well, first off, I don't think it's Israel. I definitely don't think it's Turning Point, and I don't think his wife's involved in any way,
Yeah.
right? Because that's some crazy stuff. Now, I do think the shooter is the shooter. I do think face value, it looks correct and it looks right. But I can tell you some of these pieces people are wondering about and where some of the foreign stuff is coming into play. Like, for example, like Al Qaeda's plot's a really good example. So Al Qaeda wanted to also, during their plot, take out individuals. It could be intelligence officers like me, it could be influencers like you who were speaking out against Islam, could affect the plot, etc. So there is a small pocket saying, maybe Charlie was in that category. Now, I didn't see them targeting him, but there are a lot of people like, oh, was there a movement of people to support this? So there are people saying it has a hallmark of what some people want to do. But at the end of the day, I still think we really see it as it is, right? This individual did not like him. He took an opportunity at the school when he had it. I really do believe his father saw the image, pulled him in, and we really just got a really quick turnaround. And I think that's when you get a conspiracy, right? You're like, oh, you got the guy so quick, and it can't be that easy. And a guy can't shoot that well. Well, plenty of people can shoot that distance. That wasn't and I can shoot that shot, right? So I do think too, a lot of people don't have expertise in this area, and then it's easy for them to fall into the conspiracies. But like you said, I'd like to see the trial. I do think the evidence points towards him, and I do think we also should honor his memory a bit and say, yeah, there are other actors and threat actors, and like I just talked through one, you can talk through that and say, yeah, they do want to target people that kind of fit Charlie's thing. That's fine, but I think we're getting a little extreme sometimes when we just blame people or say, "Oh no, I know it was this," or that's I think a little dangerous.
Perfect. I knew I'd like you. You so reasonable, and I'm people, because even though you have all this information that sounds, you know, it sounds like such crazy stuff that's going on, with the splinter cells or sleeper cells or whatever. I just love the fact that you are very reasonable. It's believable when I listen to you because you have evidence, you have facts, and it seems like reasonable, common sense stuff. So I appreciate you coming on, Sarah. Um, I have to have you back. If y'all find out something more about the Vegas shooting, I have to talk about it. And I appreciate you. We'll put a link in the description section to your book and how people can find you. And God bless you and thank you for joining me.
Thanks to you as well.